The second sleeve is nearly finished. I'm still adding things to this a little bit. This is the one where the aging and explodey parts are going to be added on separately, so they can be then removed and the sleeve reused for other purposes. What I've got is, I've done a ruffle here, so that's fabric manipulation. So I've got the green ruffle and then some ribbon that I've made zigzaggy. It looks a bit like rickrack because it's a similar technique. But yeah, so that's all gathered there, so that'll be on the edge of the cuff. Up here I've got some little wheat motifs. Again, I found those when I was doing my initial research. And I think it looks quite sweet. It's quite subtle. I don't want anything too complicated because if I'm going to be putting on patches, I don't want to have to spend ages recreating different embroidery techniques to kind of stick over the top, as it were. So I think for as it is, that works quite well. With the ruffling, the only thing is I pinked the edges, which did work for a time, but after a while they sort of frayed past the pinking, and now it's just a straight edge. So what I would probably do with that next time is cut it on the cross, cut it on the bias, and just hope that means there'll be less fraying. But for the meantime, it works, if a little bit unreliably. I don't really have the time to go back and redo that now, but that's something to keep in mind for next time, I think. An older lady, also on the way to the opera, she prefers the old styles. You know, there's the Shields green, which was fairly recent at about that time period, so she might have had a dress made up in that, and then either toned it down a little bit towards the end of the century, or just prefers wearing this kind of stuff. Because the colour of this, and because of how close the audience are going to be to these costumes, I decided that putting I'm going to put the rips and the tears and the stains on top of netting, and then sew those on so they can be removed. The only thing is, white netting is going to show up against the green, so I did some dye experiments to try and like colour match. These were the 3 initial colour matches I had. I did a couple of experiments with some of the what are they called? Dispersed dyes. The synthetic dyes, anyway. So these are my initial experiments. I think this one was the first. That was just the straight green. And then I left it in for a little bit longer, and then it went sort of more yellowy, and then I added some blue to the green. It was like an olive green, and I added some blue, and that came up a lot better. It matched the colour a lot better. So then I did a big swatch of a big sample of the green dye, of the green net, and that blends in a lot better. So you can, I'm still undecided, because with this I did, what was it? It was 5ml for 20 minutes or something like that. And I did 2 of these, and then I added in some more water because by that point the water had mostly evaporated. And I wanted to try again, so I put more water in, and then put the same amount of dye in to make up the water, and then the second batch came out a lot lighter, so I'm not 100% sure why that is. I think it might just be because there was a lot more water compared to the dye ratio, but that's fine. I've learned from that. So I now have this lighter green and this darker green here, and I'm not 100% sure which one I should use, because the lighter one seems to blend in better just from a distance, but if it's like ruffled up you see it more. It's more yellowy, and the darker one you can see it if it's just flat, but if it's like ruffled up it doesn't show as much. So it's sort of a difficult situation. I think I'm going to go with the darker one just because the lighter one, it looks very yellow like against it. So I'm going to stick with the darker one and see how that goes. If I do run out of that, like I've got a fair bit, I've got another piece the same size as this, so that should be more than enough to do whatever I need to do on the sleeves. If there isn't enough, then I can use some of the lighter one, but for the most part that should be fine. In terms of the flounce at the bottom of the sleeve, the cuff of the sleeve, I think it'd be better if I did it so that it matches more to these kinds of things, because I was looking at images and I was originally going to do a fabric flounce and embroider on it, but I think that that was more towards it was more sort of mid-century court clothing that I found, court attire. Things like this with the lace flounce instead seem to be more common of like the 1780s, 1775, 1780. So I figured that would probably be a better direction to go in. It also seems like they've done like 3/4 lengths, well, yeah, almost to just past the elbow. I think this is a portrait of Marie Antoinette from 1780, I think. So yeah, so I did. I got some lace. I got some lace here. And what I did was I cut a strip that was that wide, cut a strip that wide, and then I did a French seam along the edge just to make sure it's all neat and tidy, and then I folded it so that the seam was in the middle of the section, and then cut off the excess as a slant. It's like shorter at the front rather than the back, and longer at the back. Does that make sense? So it's like on this one. So it's got the shorter bit at the front and then the longer bit at the back. This was the best way I could think of doing it. It is a little bit wasteful, and I know this lace isn't recycled, which is what I was going for, but I think for such a small area it's not as bad. So then the seam would be kind of like in the centre, instead of at the front or the back, so that kind of makes it a nice silhouette. And then when it's gathered up, it can then be sewn onto the inside, and then it makes like inside the cuff, and then it makes a nice little ruffle, nice little flounce, sorry. So I think that works quite well for how I wanted it to be. The only thing is with this, I'm going to, same with the other sleeve, I'm going to age it directly. So I'm going to work into this with like sandpaper, coffee stains, nail varnish to kind of do like burn marks and scorch marks and things. The only reason for this is lace can be much more easily replaced than the whole sleeve, so this could be removable, so I could make up a second one, so you could just switch them out. The only thing with that is it would probably get lost, but for all intents and purposes this will be removable, so you can take this off again and change it out, or even just leave it off completely if that's the kind of sleeve you want. But lace is a lot easier to come by than like an entire costume, so I figured that was the best way to go. And to finish that sleeve off, I made up some bias binding at a kind of decent width, so I'll be finishing that off once I've sewn the sleeve up. And then I'll have some nice green bias binding. Get that colour, there we go. So that's in the same kind of Shields green type fabric. I was going to use that for the other sleeve as well, but I think it will look a bit odd, and I want it to be subtle rather than kind of in your face with so much green. So yeah.